So then we are back with a more understanding. So the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find ourselves during the time of Mashiyach, the 61st chapter. The prophet has stated then the returning of the holy cities, and then where it's going to be at. Obviously then there were other prophecies related with the time of the end, such as Ezekiel, and then there are lots of controversies regarding then the building of the third temple, where then there are lots of people involved with strange ideas on how it should be. And these ideas then were drawn from Ezekiel, the 40th chapter. From the 40th to 43rd chapter, you find lots of areas of the temple. However, if you read then precisely what the Mashiyach said, he said, the Mashiyach himself, Yahweh, the authority was given to him in heaven and the earth, and then he was taken over the place of his father in the Holy of Holies. Thus then began the second tabernacle services. So then we understand also the writings of Hebrews was done then via Yohanan on the holy city, where he spent then 36 months going through those Megillas, and then obviously he then did understand the services of the holy tabernacles, of the second tabernacle service, because the first anointing was then granted and the Ruach HaKodesh was very active. So then the other cities of Asia Minor, the 7 cities, were then obviously in sin. And then Yohanan, obviously he wrote then Hebrews in order to straighten them out and then set the parameter, and then from then on the holy cities adopted the holy instructions of the second tabernacle services. So where do we find then the evidence of this affirmation? Very simple. Hebrews, you find an area of the 8th chapter where then the explanation was given. Now the whole understanding of these is this: we have then a high priest who is seated on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, Yahweh himself, and he is the minister. Yahweh then is the minister of the sanctuary, Yahweh Yeshua, of the true tabernacle, and it is the tabernacle pitched for Elohim in the desert. What does it mean? Meaning then, the Son has taken over the authority, and he has then the leadership of the holy tabernacles in the earth. So the question is that going to be built in a third temple? The answer is no. There is no building of any kind of a temple because it's not part of the plan. Then obviously the idea of the third temple came from Ezekiel, but then the prophecy was taken out of context. What was then the purpose of Ezekiel and understanding then the so named the temple? What they were reading were not measurements of a temple of this age. What Ezekiel was having in a vision was then of the holy city of the new earth. It is then the capital city of Urishlim of the earth when is rebuilt. How do we understand this? Let's then evaluate what the Mashiyach has said. Mashiyach then in the 24th chapter, he said very specific words regarding then the time of restoration during troublesome times. What does it mean? He was obviously speaking of the restoration period, as the people were then organizing themselves for tabernacling. They would be tabernacling during the time of troublesome times. So there is not a third temple. What is going to have in the future is the simple tabernacle of the desert onto the promised land, as should have been done in the first place. How do we know this? Because restoration of what was already in existence. So then, let's read the directives of the Levites of the second tabernacle services via Yohanan when he was in the first holy city. What did he say? Second verse of the 8th chapter. And he is the minister. Yahweh Yeshua is the minister of the sanctuary of the true tabernacle. Do you understand these words? He is the minister of the sanctuary of the true tabernacle pitched for Elohim. Why did Yohanan use the word Elohim? Because it speaks of functions. Elohim, it's multi-function, multi-spirit, spirit plural. And then the functions of Ruach HaKodesh, we understand. That's why Elohim. And the Mashiyach then is the minister, he's the center of the second tabernacle services. What does it mean? Let's then evaluate what goes after. Then it is the tabernacle of Elohim and not man. Why did he say not man? Because he was making reference of the temple. The temple was built by man, was built by then Shlimon, but it was not instructed by the Torah. It was a gift of David, because David wanted very much the Torah and he wanted obedience. And he then gave Yahweh the temple as then a gift. But it was not part of the plan of the desert. So then we evaluate what the Mashiyach has said. What did he say then in Matitiyahu, the Levite, 23rd chapter? He said to the people of the law of the time, whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. So the Mashiyach then has the understanding of whatsoever was taught in the desert must be in place, because it was the first tabernacle service. Then came the Mashiyach, he completed the spring feast, and whatsoever was done in the past had to be completed in order for the second then to continue on. So when we read then the directives of the Levites in Hebrews, wrote by Yohanan, we understand what he is speaking of. And then the tabernacle pitched for Elohim in the desert. He is the completion. Do you understand? Completion. He is the minister of the sanctuary of the true tabernacle. Why does he speak of Elohim? Because Elohim is plural of completion. So the Mashiyach is in charge of the Holy of Holies of each city as completion. He is the Aleph and Tau. So then, what was the understanding of Ezekiel the prophet? Let's understand the 40th chapter. The people of Israel were taken out of the land and they were brought to Babylon. Ezekiel, obviously, he lost his wife, lost his family. And then, some 20 plus years later, after the destruction of the city and the temple, it should have been obviously a tabernacle over there, but it was temple. Okay? So then, Yahweh decided to take him in his spirit to show his people what would be like the new earth. Because the people during the time of the destruction of Urishlim and the temple, they thought the world or their world had ended. They thought the covenant was destroyed. And Yahweh never at any point destroyed the covenant. So he showed then Ezekiel the prophet in a spirit what it would be like then the capital building of the new world. Then you begin to pair up what Ezekiel said with Galah, or then you understand the completion of the spring feast, the 11th chapter of Galah. What does it say? And a stick was given to me like a rod, and he measured then the building of the new capital of the world. So what Yohanan saw in the 11th chapter, as we understand as 11th chapter, but in the Hebraic understanding of the Spirit, there are no chapters. You have to understand the context per times and seasons. So what Yohanan saw was then what Ezekiel saw. It's then a repeated vision given to Ezekiel and then given to Yohanan. If you read it then Ezekiel, he was given a stick. Yohanan was given a stick. So what is that indicating then? There is a capital of the world coming. So that when you read the description of the first section only, you are reading what's going to be like in the future when the new earth is established. However, in this age where we are at, there is not going to be a third temple. What it's going to be is then a simple tabernacle of the desert. And they already have the utensils. Yirmiyahu the prophet already had placed aside whatsoever was required for the services of the future, because it was already provided what was required. If you evaluate precisely what were those utensils, when then the American excavator or archaeologist found, you have a list of the items over there. Those are enough for the second tabernacle services and the returning of the tabernacle on Urishlim. It's not complicated, because the Mashiyach is explaining the closing of this age as fast as I can understand, so then the new earth is established. Then is the time for the grandiose understanding of the Torah. But try to understand this fact. When the whole nation was taken captive, then the people, they thought the world had ended. Their relationship with the Creator Yahweh had finished. This is what they were thinking. They were despondent, downcasted. And they were downcasted for many years. And it was not until nearly, roughly 25 years later, in exile, then Ezekiel, he went to rest. And then, while he was there resting, Yahweh decided to take him in his spirit. Then Yahweh brought him to the site where the holy capital of the new world is going to be at. That's why it's so magnificent what Ezekiel wrote. But it's not for this age. It's for the age to come. Because during the time when then the people of Ezekiel, they were in exile, not even the spring feast was completed. So Yahweh could not explain the second tabernacle services. How could he explain the second tabernacle services, the coming of the dead, the Bikurim, the first wave gift, How could we explain the coming of the dead and the harvest and the completion of the spring feast, then the shadow prophetic events of the Torah? He couldn't explain it. The only section left on behalf of Yahweh was explaining then when the new earth was going to be established, when the whole junk of sin and wars and destruction would be done away with. So this is what then Ezekiel saw. And then Yahweh said, make sure then you teach these to the people, because yet there is this world to come. So there is no third temple. The first temple was destroyed because it was made by man. The second temple was destroyed because it was made by man. Do you think it's going to be a third temple? Let's understand then what the Mashiyach has said. 24th chapter of Matitiyahu. Let's read what then the Levite Matitiyahu saw in the holy Megillah and described for us. Let's evaluate what Matitiyahu the Levite wrote. 24th chapter. Then he said, the Mashiyach was then, as usual, after the teaching on the temple, the people want to make him king. Very popular those days. Then he was taken up on a mountain, and then the Mashiyach began to say, for nation would rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and plagues and earthquakes in many places. But these are only the startings. Only the startings. Then people would be delivered to many tribulations, and they would destroy each other, and they would be hated because of his name. We understand. Then many would stumble because of the hate of one another and betray each other. And many false prophets would come and stumble the others and deceive many. And because of the growth of iniquity, then the obedience of many would be then weak. Then he said, but whosoever has patience until the end, or then those who can endure the path of Yahweh until the end, will to receive life. And this is great news of the kingdom to come. What is the Mashiyach explained? The kingdom to come. And these great news of the kingdom to come. What was then Ezekiel showing in the spirit? The great news of the kingdom to come. When you observe then the sign of the unclean and desolation, this was then the pig roasted, obviously we understand. It was spoken of by the prophet. Then let him understand. And then he explains further until the time would be shortened. The time given to Gentiles is going to be shortened, because then the selected are going to return to the holy services. But return to the holy services is very simple. It's very uncomplicated, because this age must be finished first, then for the other age to start. Then the third verse of the 24th chapter. And while then the Mashiyach was then on the Mount of Olives, his disciples then drew near, and were saying among themselves to him, would you please say to us what wilt be the sign of the coming of the end of the world? What they were asking is this, how it's going to end this age then, in order for us then to enjoy what's coming then in the new earth. Then the Mashiyach answered and said, be aware, let no man deceive you. So then let's understand what the Mashiyach is saying. Does it not give you the proper understanding, let no man deceive you, because he came out of the temple and they wanted to make him king. Does it not link? Let no man deceive you. Then when you read Hebrews, then the 8th chapter, 2nd verse, and he is the minister of the sanctuary of the true tabernacle, pitched for Elohim and not man. So the Mashiyach is giving us then proper understanding. Let no man deceive you. Because you boys, you rely so much on this temple, but then not a stone is going to be left upon another. If you read, you understand. Then he continues. Be aware, let no man deceive you, for many will come in my name and say, he or she is the Mashiyach. He already, with the line of the people, he already was then in line with what they wanted, but he was already saying, you people are deceived. You are placing your trust upon this temple of yours, and not a stone is going to be left upon another. So be aware of it. For you are bound to hear of revolutions and rumors of wars. What does it say? It is obviously the natural fact of wars and rumors of wars on the planet. But he has a context explaining then the spiritual warfare in the spirit against the holy tabernacles. Watch out and do not be disturbed. For it is required that you then go through these, but the end is not yet. So then the people are bound to hear of these wars and rumors of wars. What he's explaining is these waves of world's system coming against the holy tabernacles. There is no third temple. The Mashiyach is explaining in a very simplistic layer of this age ending, and then explaining the kingdom to come. So then let's reevaluate what Yahweh has said. Then he was there in the temple teaching as usual. Then his disciples drew near and were showing the Mashiyach, the construction of the temple, as if they had some sort of a power in themselves to say, we can make you king. So the Mashiyach already said, oh boy, there they are again, trying to make in this age their own kingdom. And Yahweh was not for it. But Yahweh said to them, behold, don't you observe these? He was pointing to the temple. Truly I say to you, absolutely no area of it is going to be spared. Because you are placing your trust in a temple. The temple is not important. This is what the Mashiyach is saying. The most important is understanding the second tabernacle services, because the Mashiyach, Yahweh, wanted then the most simplistic layer of understanding of the closing of this age. And in order for these simplistic understandings of being absolutely, concretely placed on paper and in their minds and their spirits, then the Mashiyach, he delayer what they want of the kingdom to come versus what must be completed in this age. So let's evaluate what the Mashiyach has said. Not a stone is going to be left upon another. That should not be thrown down. And then, while the Messiah was on the Mount of Olives, his disciples then drew near, and were saying among themselves to him, "Could you please say to us then how it's going to be then the sign of the coming of the end of the world?" Then they did understand. The Messiah was explaining first the most simplistic understanding of the closing of this age first. Then the Messiah said to them, "Be aware, let no man deceive you." That Messiah is already explaining. So the Messiah is then removing away their fable, their desire of to make this world their kingdom. So then he continues, "Be aware, let no man deceive you, for many would come in his name and said he or she is the Messiah. And many would be deceived, for you are bound to hear of revolutions and wars and rumors of wars, and watch out, do not be disturbed." So the Messiah is explaining, while then the simplistic understanding of the completion of this age then is geared towards the tabernacles. He said, don't let yourselves be troubled with what's involved with the completion of this period of time when the tabernacles are finishing with this age. Then the Messiah goes on and on and on and on, and he said then, and then the end would come, and the kingdom. Do you understand? Then he said, after the whole warning and then the whole understanding, then the Messiah said, and then the time would come. And then he said, and this great news. What is he explaining? Then when this age is completed, then comes the new earth. Then you read Ezekiel. Those are then the drawings of the capital of the world, the New Urishlim. How can you make this conclusion? Very simple. The people, they were in exile and they thought the world of Yahweh and them were ended. But it was not. The covenant remained. The only way Yahweh could have the people understand is showing them how it's going to be the new earth. The spring feast was not completed. The great prophet yet was not revealed. There was no spring feast yet of the shadow prophetic events to come. Autumn feast, vengeance, those areas were not even completed. But people, they wanted then a certainty of Yahweh's presence. What has Yahweh shown Ezekiel? Show them the new capital of the world, where they are going to enjoy the earth as a whole and themselves enjoying the holy capital. So in this age, there is no third temple. It's not going to be built. What is going to return is the simple tent of the desert. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. Yet during the time of tribulations, yet the tabernacles are going to be established. Do not be concerned or do not be afraid because the time is not yet. Don't let yourselves be troubled, because the Messiah was explaining the simplistic understanding of the closing of this age first. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. When this age is completed, then the great news. What are these great news? Ezekiel, the capital of the new earth. Read in Hebrews the 8th chapter. Let's understand. Let's reevaluate what Matitiyahu, the Levite. We are reading Matitiyahu, the Levite. He was acquainted with the services of the holy tabernacle. Let's understand what he said in the 23rd chapter. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. Why was then the integrity maintained? Because the first tabernacle service was then completed. Then the second tabernacle service says, plural, the Mashiyach would be in charge. The Mashiyach is in charge of the second tabernacle services, including Urishlim. So then, when we read Hebrews then Yohanan wrote Hebrews. Yohanan, the 8th chapter. The whole understanding is this: we have a high priest who is seated on the right hand of the majesty in heaven, Yahweh himself, the creator, and he is the minister. Yahweh Yeshua is the minister of the sanctuary in the earth, of the true tabernacle of Elohim. Pitched tabernacle, pitched. So the simplistic understanding of the closing of this age is going to be a tabernacle, a simple tabernacle on a Temple Mount. He's not going to have a third temple. Otherwise, it would not be time of restoration. We have to understand the time of restoration because it leads to vengeance. Autumn feast. In order for the autumn feast never experienced in the earth, this planet, the kingdoms never experienced vengeance. In order for vengeance to come where Yahweh is absolutely in charge, whatsoever He told us to do and observe, we should do and observe. Isn't that true? Is Yahweh interested in temple? No, He's interested in a tabernacle He told Moses to do and observe. The Mashiyach said, whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. What do you think is going to be on Temple Mount? A simple tabernacle. What people have mixed themselves with is the other layer of what is coming in the future. So when you read the Torah as a whole, you understand there is then the closing of this age first. You find information related with this age first. Then you find the other layer of the kingdom to come. And then the great news of the kingdom to come. This is what you read in Matitiyahu. Reread Matitiyahu, the 24th chapter. But whoever then endures until the end will to have life. He's understanding this. Those who are then enlightened to endure until the closing of this age. Most simplistic understanding you can ever have. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. Then we read then the Levite explaining to us, then we read Yohanan explaining then to the Levites what to do. But the whole understanding of the situation is this: we have then a high priest seated then on the right hand of majesty, a power on high, next to Yahweh the Creator, and then Yahweh Yeshua is the minister of the sanctuary in the earth. Must be finished and closed the first and the most simplistic understanding. Where do you find the most simplistic understanding? You find whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe this, do and observe. When you read Ezekiel, Ezekiel is not doing whatsoever Moses told him to do and observe. Isn't it true? But when you read Moshe, then whatsoever the people should be doing is whatsoever Moses told them to do and observe. Ezekiel is then the plant, or then the understanding of the building of the new capital of Urishlim. So there is no third temple, because it can't be built by man. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe these, do and observe. What indicates the future is going to be so confusing, so much confusion is going to be in the land of Israel. And then the whole area of the Temple Mount is going to be absolutely destroyed and clean, and a simple tabernacle of the desert is going to be there on top. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. Then this age closes. Then we understand what Yahweh is preparing Himself. What you read in Ezekiel is what Yahweh is preparing, not made by man. Then Yahweh Yeshua completes, and then he said, and if those days were not shortened, then he's explaining the layer of understanding of the Samaritans. Gave them 2 days, understanding 2,000 years. From the time over the Mashiyach, then he explained to those Samaritans when he came down from the Mount Gerizim. Then he gave them 2 days, 2,000 years. He spent time with the Samaritans, 5031, early 5032. He was placed on a pole 5032. Then you calculate 2,000 years later, because he's speaking of a day, Yom Day, 1,000 years each. Places in 7031, 7032. We are already over the 7,000. Gives us a bit below of 20 years only left. In these next maximum of 20 years, absolutely the very maximum, we have to have the reduction of time, we have the returning of the holy cities. We understand that there is not going to be a third temple, but a simple tabernacle. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. When you read Ezekiel, is he doing what Moses told him to do? No. You are reading what's coming yet in the kingdom to come government. Please stay tuned. Much more coming up.